Bad wall decor is one of the most common reasons a room looks wrong. Not because people are careless, but because most of the mistakes are things people do deliberately, thinking they're the right call. This guide covers the most frequent wall decor mistakes that I see and why they're problems and what to do instead. Hi, I'm Nina, a celebrity interior designer, and this channel, The Red Elevator, covers the design decisions that actually change how a room feels. Wall decor is one I keep coming back to because it looks straightforward, but it's where most of the room's visual cheapness lives. It's the first thing a trained eye picks up on. Today, 7 wall decor mistakes I see constantly, why they're not working, and exactly how to fix them. Quick thing before we dive in. I do not have a problem contouring my nose. I'm actually quite good at it. And I apologize if the video was distracting last time. I think the shadow of the sun and our lighting hit my nose in a weird way. So anyway, I thought that was funny, so I wanted to share with you. We have upgraded our lighting. It was very costly, but anything for you guys, we love you. And I apologize for that, so let's get into it. If you're new here, by the way, subscribe because I post every week and I keep it practical, not fluff, no filter, just advice you can actually use and really elevate your style and become your own interior designer. So, on to mistake number 1. Every piece of wall decor is hung at the exact same height. The eye level rule gets applied to every frame on every wall in every room. It feels correct. It's not. So, when everything sits on the same horizontal line, your eye just tracks straight across the wall and no variation. It doesn't have rhythm. There's no room. Everything feels very static. So eye level is a starting point, not the rule. The room tells you where things should actually go. In a dining room, dropping art slightly pulls focus down onto where people are actually sitting, which makes it feel so much more intimate. And rooms with high ceilings, keeping everything at standard height disconnects the wall from the furniture below it. So raising a key piece reestablish that vertical balance. So even with the same wall, not everything needs to be on the same line. A slightly lower piece here, a higher one there. That variation creates movement. It's what makes a space feel designed rather than just decorated. Okay, number 2, the next issue that we see is that your frames are just too lightweight for the scale of the wall. So people rarely notice this consciously, but they always feel it. Something looks unfinished and they can't identify why. Frame weight is usually the reason. So thin, minimal frames on large walls disappear. They don't have enough presence to anchor the space, so the art floats, disconnected from everything around it. The wall reads as under-designed. There's always a clear relationship between wall scale and frame weight in well-designed interiors. Larger walls need more substance, not more pieces, just more presence. That means a thicker frame profile that grounds the artwork is important, a wider mat that increases visual weight while giving the piece room to breathe. Now, with that said, there are certain pieces that still need a very clean frame. A bigger frame does not mean a very wide, ornate frame. Actually, quite the contrary. It just means that it possesses weight and thickness that's important, but it doesn't have to be giant for it to work, if that makes sense. In more considered spaces, layered framing may make the piece feel architectural rather than just decorative. That's always fun to do. The goal is to have art that feels anchored, not just pasted on. So, number 3, another issue we see time and time again is that your wall decor is too matchy. This one is the most common reason a space feels flat, even when everything is expensive. So imagine, the assumption is that if the rug, pillows, and art share the same palette, the room would feel cohesive. And what actually happens is that it feels controlled. staged, like everything was chosen in one afternoon, and it just doesn't look elevated enough. Good interiors have tension, a piece that doesn't perfectly match anything else but still belongs. That contrast is what separates curated from coordinated. This is where ink poster actually becomes genuinely useful. Your taste changes over time, and what you're drawn to now probably won't be what you want in a year. Most art locks you into one fixed moment, but Ink Poster doesn't. That's really why I decided for this video that I wanted to partner with them. The artwork can shift as the room evolves without having to redesign everything around it. And this is what I am so excited to share with you guys, because I'm actually installing one in my home, and I thought this would be a great way to introduce it to my followers. So from a design standpoint, having NFTs exposed or having wall art that is not stagnant integrates beautifully into your home, and no cords, no cables. It hangs on the wall like a frame print, even when it's off. So it still displays the artwork, so you're never left with a black screen on the wall. So this technology is pretty fantastic. So it doesn't read like a screen. There's no glow, there's no flicker. It sits much closer to real paper and ink, which is why it works in more elevated interiors without feeling out of place. So everything is managed through the app, updating your art, building out a gallery, adjusting as the space changes, and none of it disrupts the room. So, number 4 mistake that I see, you're neglecting negative space in your gallery. Most gallery walls don't fail because of the art. They fail because what's happening between the art. The instinct to treat a gallery wall like a filling exercise, every gap gets a frame, every blank section gets solved, the wall ends up doing too much at once, or the spacing is so inconsistent that nothing feels connected. Either way, chaotic, unresolved. So, in well-considered interiors, negative space is part of the composition. You guys know I talk about it all the time, how much I love negative space, how important it is in a room, and how much you need to pay attention to it, especially in a gallery wall. That's where people forget. The gaps between the pieces are just as intentional as the pieces themselves. Consistent spacing, even within an asymmetrical layout, gives the eye somewhere to land. There's rhythm, a quiet sense of order. The biggest shift is usually just doing less. Fewer pieces with more breathing room almost always reads better. Each piece gets to exist on its own instead of competing for attention. Negative space is what makes a wall feel really edited rather than filled. And it is something that you learn over time as your eye evolves and you become a more mature interior designer or a connoisseur of good design. So it is something that you will learn over time. This is something I cover in my one-on-one Zoom consultations as well, because it really does depend on the specific wall, the room, and the layout. And I actually had this exact issue come up last week when I was on a Zoom call with a client who had her gallery wall, but there was something that was wrong. And so we tackled it in her space. And I was able to give her really good advice as to how to redo this so that it looks like an absolute professional designed it. The link is in the description. All you have to do is click it. My calendar comes up and you can book a 25-minute session or longer. All right, number 5. Guys, you're centering art on the wall with no regard to the furniture or anything else that's happening in the room. So someone measures everything perfectly, centers the art on the wall, steps back, and it still feels off. Why? Well, the reason is almost always the same. The furniture was completely ignored. The sofa, console, bed, whatever anchors the space below gets left out of the entire equation. So the art ends up in its own world, unrelated to everything around it. And that's when it looks like a showroom that you walked into off the street that's trying to sell art and pieces of furniture. So the reason this doesn't feel right is really hard to describe, but I'm going to try. So the wall isn't an independent surface. It's part of a larger composition. The art, the furniture, and the space between them should read as one unified moment. The fix, this is what I would say. Stop centering art on the wall and start anchoring it to what's below. So even if you have a sofa in a corner of a room and you have a big piece of art, don't put the art in the middle of the wall just because it's the middle of the wall. Find the center of the sofa and put the wall centered with the sofa, even if it's in the corner. So what happens is that the art stops floating, The furniture stops feeling isolated and the whole thing reads as grounded. Please remember that. Okay, number 6, saving wall decor for the final decorating step is also a very big mistake. Your sofa, your rug, your lighting, your accessories all need to be carefully considered. Then you look at, the walls and start trying to fill them in, and that's where it sort of all falls apart. I see that time and time again. People leave the art for last, but it is very hard to choose art without knowing what's happening, so you need to do it all at the same time. So every decision becomes reactive. Art gets chosen to solve sort of emptiness rather than contribute to a composition, and the result is pieces that are slightly the wrong scale or off in tone or visually disconnected from the rest of the room. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't pick art after your furniture is in. You certainly can do that. It's just going to be a lot more difficult, and you will have to probably dig a lot deeper to find the right art, and you will probably need a lot more advice. So it needs to be thought in rather than an afterthought. In more considered interiors, the walls are part of the initial design language. From the start, you're thinking about where art will live, what scale each art needs, how color moves through the space, how the light hits the walls, because you certainly don't want your art to fade either. And, how are you going to add UV, protection on that glass opening, and are you going to have plants in that opening which might not get enough UV, but then the art gets the UV? I mean, there's so many things you guys need to consider. So that is why I always say preparedness is very important. When wall decor is considered that early, the art doesn't feel sort of placed in the room. It feels like it always belonged there, and it's really meant to be. All right, our final mistake that I had to share with you, which I think is very, very important, is lighting the room but not the wall or the art. This happens in multi-million dollar projects. I come in as an interior designer, I have to stop the architect, and most of the time I notice that there isn't a lighting engineer that is hired because the architect most often drops in a recessed ceiling plan, because that's part of his scope, by the way, and everyone goes along with it. But the one mistake that I made in my home when I built the house, I basically built it with a manager rather than a contractor, because I knew a lot of what to do, was skipping out on the lighting engineer, not wanting to pay the extra money because my architect had a lighting plan. But there were so many nuances that were forgotten because the architect is not a lighting engineer. And this is where you need to think in advance, because once the walls are closed, you cannot make changes and your switches are basically done. And you can't take certain things on or off those switches. My most important, most valuable insight that I have taken away from building my entire home was make sure that your art switches are in a separate gang. Do not mix your regular recessed lighting or any lighting with the art light. Art light needs to have its own separate switch. Okay, please remember that. I think I'm going to engrave it on my arm. Maybe that will be my first tattoo. Art light should have its own switch. What do you guys think? Okay, so as I've mentioned repeatedly, you need to consider how you're going to light your art, because at night, when nothing else is on and you have a faint, beautiful dim light on your art, the house just comes alive. That's what distinguishes a multi-million dollar estate from your everyday home. And you can get that look in a one-bedroom apartment or a one-bedroom or a studio even, and get that multi-million dollar estate feel if you just think through your art lighting. Most people rely on general room lighting, as I mentioned, and floor lamps, ambient lighting, and it's just not enough. What actually happens is the walls sit in uneven shadow, and strong pieces start to disappear, or they just get washed out and lose whatever depth they had, and there goes the money spent and wasted on the art. So in more considered interiors, as I've mentioned, lighting is directional and intentional. You're not just lighting the room, you're lighting specific moments within it. Art is one of the most important of those moments, and you want to highlight them. Lastly, thank you again, Ink Poster, for sponsoring this video, and the link to this fantastic art frame is in the description section. So 7 mistakes that are all fixable, other than the last one, but there are still things that you can do. You can always bring in a lighting person. In fact, I'm thinking about doing that myself because it's a pet peeve of mine. You do have to make some holes and you do have to patch, but in all honesty, these mistakes are all fixable. So no, you don't need a big budget, just a more intentional approach to what's already there. If you want a trained eye on your actual space, the link to book a one-on-one consultation, as I mentioned, is in the description. My calendar has been overly booked. I am floored about how many wonderful questions are coming in. In fact, I think I should do I'm going to ask you guys in the beginning of each of our calls, so don't fret when I say, can we use this as a case study? You certainly don't have to. There's no pressure. But whoever wants me to use them as a case study, I think it would be great to be able to share some of the mistakes and some of the solutions that we've had. These are real working problems that we are fixing by the end of the session. So I'm going to ask you guys if you are into it, and maybe we just do photos like before and after. We don't have to show you guys, but maybe we just show the space without identifying anybody's identity and be able to give everybody a great takeaway. Let me know if that makes sense, and if you guys are interested in that. I would love to do things that are just more practical and real life issues. So I love you guys. Thank you for being so wonderful on this channel. Don't forget, we also have a vlog. Yes, a very, very frightening vlog where I am running around like a chicken without a head, chicken with a head cut off. That's right, that's me. And you can see all the ins and outs of how everything runs smoothly or not so smoothly behind the scenes. I love you guys, and I'll see you here on the red elevator next week.